Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a massive and honestly highly provocative critique of modern family law. Today we're exploring a framework that views marriage not just as some legal contract you sign, but as a deep biological imperative. And the core argument here, that forcibly breaking that bond causes systemic, measurable trauma. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with this incredible imagery used by the source right out of the gate, comparing their life to a survivalist John Wick kind of existence. They use this to describe the profound, completely isolating devastation of a dismantled marriage. The author literally views themselves as a political refugee within their own life. So right away, you know this isn't framed as your standard bad breakup. It's described as a total dismantling of someone's world by external pressures. To digest these really big claims, here is our agenda for today. 1. The biology of pair bonding. 2. The trauma of separation. 3. Genocide against monogamy. 4. The divorce industrial complex. And 5. Ecosystems of avoidance.
All right, Section 1, the biology of pair bonding.
According to this framework, pair bonding is absolutely not just some cultural norm or a romantic choice we make. The source describes it as a literal fact of physics. Think of it as an irreversible biological and spiritual reality. The material conceptualizes it as essentially a child bond that has been biologically repurposed for adults. In this view, two souls practically become one organism. So separating them isn't just sad. The source argues it's biologically unnatural, kind of like severing an actual limb.
And this right here is where we hit the core friction of the entire argument. The source contrasts this intense biological imperative against society's modern tendency to treat marriage vows as just symbolic. When someone who is genuinely, fiercely pair-bonded says "till death do us part," they mean it with literally every fiber of their being. But the framework argues our current society often treats these profound commitments as just a meaningless boilerplate vow, which completely sets the stage for a massive emotional and legal collision. Now, why does this matter to us? Well, because even if you personally don't view marriage through this intense biological lens, understanding how deeply others experience it is totally crucial for navigating modern relationships.
Which brings us to Section 2, the trauma of separation.
To explain the depth of this trauma, the author borrows a really fascinating concept from tort law called the thin skull principle. In the legal world, this basically means you take your victim as you find them. So if someone happens to have a naturally thin skull and you hit them, you're responsible for the severe damage, even if a totally average person wouldn't have been hurt nearly as badly. The source cleverly applies this to psychology, arguing that a fiercely committed, pair-bonded person has an immense pre-existing psychological vulnerability. And because of that vulnerability, breaking that bond inflicts severe, measurable mental disease and trauma that our current legal system completely fails to recognize.
So, the huge question we have to ask is this. If pair bonding truly is an irreversible biological fact, how exactly does the modern legal system handle its rupture? Well, according to the source material, the answer is disastrously. This intensely personal, raw vulnerability ends up clashing violently with the cold, bureaucratic machinery of modern family law.
That clash leads right into Section 3, genocide against monogamy.
The source contrasts two completely different worldviews here. On one side, you have the biological ideal of a sacrificial, lifelong bond, a true till death do us part commitment that's meant to span generations. But on the other side, that ideal is directly opposed by a modern system that treats marriage like a disposable arrangement, almost like closing a checking account. Just think about how normalized divorce has become today. The source argues that this whole easy come, easy go mentality is entirely fundamentally incompatible with the biological reality of fiercely committed people.
And the author goes far beyond just calling this a sad cultural trend. They frame this legal shift as an intentional attack. The exact phrasing used is a systemic genocide against monogamy. The claim here is that the current system is actively orchestrated by external actors to dismantle fiercely committed monogamous relationships, ultimately tearing apart the very fabric of society and leaving individuals completely alienated and devastated. It's a remarkably heavy accusation.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the divorce industrial complex.
The framework outlines some incredibly severe systemic grievances here. According to the source, the legal machine simply isn't designed to resolve conflict. Instead, it actively weaponizes a lack of family support, specifically targeting people who don't have safety nets. It extracts capital, meaning both financial and intellectual wealth, from families during their absolute peak moments of fragility. The source goes so far as to claim that the system functions as state-scaled domestic abuse, explicitly driven by systemic misandry, all while simultaneously eroding basic foundational property rights.
Like we said, that is a massive list of allegations about how family law actually operates in practice.
The source paints a vivid picture of this legal environment, calling it a house of mirrors. Rather than operating on objective justice or, the ideal of due process, the material argues that family law relies on highly precarious, chaotic, and completely subjective legal rulings. It's described as an environment where personality-driven, fast-moving systems just break down. They turn a total blind eye to real human pain and enable widespread systemic coercion.
To categorize all of this, the framework uses the term fifth-wave feminism. It positions this systemic lack of rights for men and the intentional breakdown of the monogamous covenant as an ideological shift that actively prioritizes dismantling traditional family structures. Now, it's really important to note how the source treats this concept. It is not presented as just emotional venting. The author frames it as a derived, mathematical reality of systemic misandry that society needs to recognize if we're ever going to establish true accountability.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Ecosystems of Avoidance.
A colleague quoted in the material offers this really critical insight, and it perfectly captures a major blind spot in human nature. It's very hard for people to stay with someone else's pain. The mind tries to protect itself. It makes a lot of sense, right? When we witness profound, raw trauma in someone else, our brains involuntarily try to escape it. We just instinctively look away. And you can see how this reflex maps out on a macro level. Step 1, we witness intense trauma. Step 2, our minds involuntarily protect us by forcing us to look away. Step 3, this leads to broad societal disengagement. Everyone just sort of tunes it out, which brings us to Step 4. Because society struggles to look at the pain, deep systemic injustice is allowed to thrive completely unchecked. It essentially creates this toxic ecosystem where abusers win and the fiercely committed are destroyed in silence.
The author traces this massive evasion of accountability back to what they call arrested development. This is described as a societal immaturity where unresolved generational trauma creates highly competitive family dynamics rather than nurturing ones. And because we avoid the pain of looking at this dysfunction, we end up infantilizing individuals, removing true accountability, and allowing these destructive legal frameworks to act as tools for liability avoidance.
So we leave you with this incredibly provocative thought derived directly from the source's framework. If our modern legal and cultural systems are actively weaponizing our natural avoidance of pain just to dismantle fierce biological commitments, what exactly is the path forward? How do we build institutions and legal frameworks that truly honor a till death do us part commitment, rather than treating marriage as a cheap, disposable arrangement? It's a really challenging perspective on the true cost of our modern family structures, and it definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.